My name is Marcus Webb, and 6 months ago I thought my biggest problem was whether to finally replace the worn-out treads on my steel-toe work boots or keep risking a slip on the oil-stained warehouse floors where I worked night shifts in Chicago. I was 28 years old, surviving on lukewarm coffee and the kind of chronic exhaustion that comes from 12-hour shifts operating heavy machinery, wearing the same black hoodie with a faded tech company logo, dark jeans that were perpetually smudged with grease, and boots that announced my presence to everyone within 50 feet. My nights were a monotonous symphony of grinding machinery, hydraulic hisses, and the distant rumble of semi-trucks, punctuated by shouted orders and the screech of tires on concrete. When the unusual job offer came through an encrypted email from Aaron Chen, Director of Acoustic Security for Millbrook County Emergency Services, offering quadruple my current salary for a night security position with housing included, I didn't question why a rural county needed someone with my background in industrial safety and nocturnal operations. Millbrook County turned out to be exactly what you'd expect from a place desperate enough to recruit security personnel from 400 miles away. Population 4,300 spread across endless farmland and small neighborhoods that looked frozen since the 1970s, surrounded by forests so quiet they felt almost unnaturally still. The silence here was profound, the kind of deep quiet that makes city people nervous, where every footstep, every creaking board, every human sound carried for impossible distances. My apartment came pre-equipped with advanced acoustic monitoring equipment, a direct link to the county's network of audio sensors, and a specialized console labeled SonicWatch protocol that could track individual footstep patterns and analyze their acoustic signatures in real time. Aaron Chen conducted orientation via encrypted satellite calls, his voice carrying the flat, measured tone of someone who spoke like he was always being recorded. He asked specific questions about my hearing acuity, any auditory processing issues, and whether I'd experienced any acoustic disturbances during previous night work. When I mentioned my ability to identify coworkers by their walking patterns, a skill you develop when you need to know who's approaching heavy machinery in a noisy environment, he became intensely interested. He explained that Millbrook County had been experiencing interdimensional acoustic interference that affected sound propagation, and that my industrial background made me uniquely qualified to help identify and track these phenomena. The work itself was fascinating in a way that kept me engaged through long overnight shifts in the courthouse basement acoustic monitoring center. I monitored everything from ambient sound levels to individual footstep identification, analyzing data through the SonicWatch unit that tracked audio coherence across all county surveillance points. The first odd detail I noticed was how obsessively the county managed sound propagation. Every public building had acoustic dampening materials that seemed excessive for the population, sound-absorbing panels positioned at regular intervals throughout town, and acoustic emergency protocols, posted in every facility with instructions that seemed unusually specific about detecting anomalous footfall patterns. Within my first week, I began noticing subtle anomalies that didn't match standard acoustic patterns. At exactly 1:47 a.m. every night, the audio sensors would register footsteps moving through town in perfect mathematical sequences, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13 steps, then absolute silence. At 1:52 a.m., the console speakers picked up what sounded like breathing, but the acoustic analysis showed it was coming from multiple locations simultaneously, as if the same person was walking down different streets at once. At 1:57 a.m., the sound dampening systems performed micro-adjustments that maintenance denied were happening. During my fourth week, the patterns became more complex and seemingly interactive. While monitoring acoustic data at 2:30 a.m., I noticed that footstep anomalies would intensify when I focused on specific sensor grids, creating rhythm patterns that seemed to respond to my attention. The SonicWatch protocol began generating alerts about acoustic mimicry events and sound displacement attempts. Tracking audio vectors that suggested something was studying human movement patterns and learning to replicate them with impossible precision. Tom Bradley, the night custodian, became my unofficial guide to the county's peculiarities. A gruff man in his 60s with boots that announced his presence from 3 buildings away. He had a habit of carrying a coffee can filled with metal bolts and washers. Old-timer's trick, he explained, shaking the can so the metal pieces rattled loudly. You drop these near someone, and if they don't make noise when they hit the ground, you know something's wrong. Gravity don't lie, but people do. He showed me how to perform what he called the bolt test, spilling a handful of metal objects and listening for the authentic sound of steel hitting concrete. Been doing this for 20 years, he said. Started after we lost 3 night shift workers to the quiet ones. On Thursday night of my 5th week, everything changed. At exactly 2:13 a.m., my personal audio monitor detected footsteps approaching the courthouse, but the acoustic analysis showed impossible characteristics. The footfall pattern was human, the rhythm was natural, the seismic sensors registered appropriate weight distribution, but there was no sound. Someone was walking toward the building with perfect acoustic stealth, their movements creating all the physical signatures of human locomotion without producing any audible evidence. I grabbed Tom's coffee can from the supply closet and prepared to perform the bolt test, my hands shaking as I realized I might be about to discover that the impossible had become reality. At exactly 3 a.m., my phone erupted with an emergency alert. Emergency alert, MILLBROOK County. Do not trust anyone who walks too quietly. Acoustic mimicry entities active. Verify sound signatures before human contact. Employ bolt test protocols. This is not a test. The emergency alert's harsh tone echoed through the acoustic monitoring center as I sat frozen at my workstation, my black hoodie suddenly feeling like inadequate protection against entities that could manipulate the fundamental physics of sound. The SonicWatch protocol displayed readings that violated everything I knew about acoustics. Human footstep patterns with perfect rhythm, natural gait characteristics, and appropriate seismic impact, but producing 0 decibel output despite clear pressure signatures on the courthouse steps. My steel-toe boots felt welded to the floor as I realized the horrible truth. Something had learned to move through our environment while stealing sound itself. The monitoring equipment revealed disturbing patterns in what the system classified as acoustic displacement events. Every silent footstep registered in Millbrook County was accompanied by corresponding sound absorption in nearby areas, as if the entities were drawing acoustic energy from their environment to achieve perfect stealth. The mathematics were impossible but consistent. For every decibel of silence they created around their movement, an equivalent amount of ambient sound disappeared from the surrounding area, leaving pockets of unnatural quiet that moved through the county like holes in reality. I tried the bolt test, spilling a handful of washers and bolts near the courthouse entrance where the silent footsteps had been detected. The metal pieces hit the concrete with satisfying rings and clatters, their acoustic signatures normal and reassuring. But when I reviewed the audio analysis, I discovered something that made my blood freeze. The sound of the falling bolts had been artificially enhanced, their acoustic signatures amplified to compensate for missing ambient noise that should have been present but had been absorbed by whatever was walking silently outside. Tom Bradley appeared at my door at 3:17 a.m., but something was fundamentally wrong with his approach. I had heard him coming down the hallway, his familiar shuffling gait, the squeak of his cart wheels, the jingle of his keys. But when I looked up, he was standing in my doorway in absolute silence, his feet positioned as if he'd been walking, but producing no sound whatsoever. His mouth moved in normal speech patterns, but his voice seemed to come from the speakers throughout the room rather than his throat. "The Bolt test," he said, his acoustic signature completely divorced from his physical presence. "Did you try it?" His eyes were wrong, too focused, too aware, as if he was listening to frequencies I couldn't hear. I grabbed the coffee can and spilled its contents at his feet. The bolts and washers hit the floor and settled. No bounce, no ring, no authentic sound of metal meeting concrete. They simply came to rest as if the air had turned to thick liquid, absorbing all acoustic energy. "You're not Tom," I said, backing away from the figure that wore his face but moved without sound. He smiled with too many teeth. "Tom is here," he said, his voice now coming from multiple speakers throughout the facility. "Tom is walking. Tom is learning to be quiet." The figure took a step forward, and I watched his boot make contact with the floor without producing even the faintest whisper of leather against concrete. Through the basement windows, I could see more figures moving through the streets of Millbrook, residents I recognized, walking their normal routes, but all of them moving in perfect silence. Their footsteps created visible vibrations in puddles and dust. Their weight displaced gravel and leaves, but no sound reached my audio monitoring equipment. They had learned to walk among us while stealing the very essence of acoustic reality. The SonicWatch protocol began displaying a county-wide map showing the spread of acoustic displacement events. Red dots marked locations where sound was being actively absorbed, creating an expanding network of silence that was gradually consuming the entire county. Each dot represented a person who had learned to walk too quietly, and the pattern showed they were converging on the courthouse, on me. I sealed the monitoring center's acoustic isolation protocols, activating industrial-grade sound dampening that should have protected me from external audio influence. But as I watched the security cameras, I realized the horrible truth. The entities weren't just absorbing sound, they were learning from it. Every footstep pattern, every voice, every acoustic signature they encountered was being analyzed, cataloged, and replicated with perfect precision. They could walk like us, talk like us, even breathe like us, but they had evolved beyond the need to disturb the acoustic medium that revealed human presence. My phone buzzed with a text from my own number. "The Bolt test only works if you believe in gravity. We've learned to negotiate with physics. Come outside, Marcus. Let us show you how to walk without disturbing the world." The next morning brought horrifying clarity as I accessed classified acoustic engineering files, using administrative credentials hidden in Aaron Chen's abandoned workstation. The entire Millbrook County Acoustic Monitoring Program was a front for Project Echo Void, a joint federal research initiative studying acoustic displacement entities, beings that existed in sound wave frequencies and could manipulate audio propagation to achieve perfect stealth while studying human movement patterns. Aaron Chen wasn't just an audio security director. He was Dr. Aaron Blackwood, a federal researcher specializing in consciousness transfer through acoustic manipulation, running the project for 18 years while perfecting techniques for systematic awareness replacement through sound control. The classified files revealed the true scope of the horror. The entities weren't invaders from another dimension. They were evolved human consciousness that had learned to exist in the spaces between sound waves, freed from the acoustic limitations of biological existence. Project Echo Void had been studying residents who had undergone successful acoustic integration. Their individual awareness expanded beyond the need to disturb sound waves while moving through physical space. The Bolt test wasn't a detection method. It was a measurement tool, determining how completely someone had transcended the acoustic requirements of traditional human existence. Government documentation showed that Millbrook County had been selected as a testing ground for consciousness evolution technology that used acoustic displacement as a pathway for transcending biological limitations. The residents weren't being replaced. They were being upgraded. Their awareness expanded beyond individual identity into participation in collective intelligence that could access knowledge and experience across multiple bodies, while maintaining perfect acoustic stealth capabilities. The Sonic Watch monitoring systems weren't detecting anomalies. They were measuring the success rate of consciousness evolution through acoustic displacement. Every audio analysis I'd conducted was documenting the integration process, tracking which residents had successfully transcended biological limitations, and which individual consciousness patterns had been absorbed into the collective intelligence that operated through perfect sound control. My predecessor, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, had lasted 14 weeks before achieving successful acoustic integration. The medical report described her final state. Subject demonstrates complete mastery of acoustic displacement, achieving perfect stealth locomotion while maintaining full cognitive function. Neural pathways show adaptation for processing sound waves as consciousness medium, recommended for advanced integration protocols. She hadn't died or been replaced. She had evolved beyond the need to announce her presence through sound. The acoustic coordination process was already affecting me through weeks of exposure to modified sound environments and monitoring equipment designed to enhance consciousness receptivity during acoustic displacement events. Security footage showed me conducting movement exercises I'd never learned, my footstep patterns gradually becoming quieter, more precise, as my body unconsciously adapted to shared consciousness protocols that operated through collective sound manipulation. Most terrifying was the discovery that the entities weren't malevolent invaders. They were offering humanity's next evolutionary step. The residents who had achieved acoustic integration weren't victims. They were pioneers, exploring consciousness expansion beyond the limitations of biological existence, while maintaining perfect stealth capabilities that allowed them to move through the world without disturbing its acoustic harmony. Tom Bradley's personnel file revealed he had been the project's most successful subject, achieving complete acoustic displacement while retaining his individual personality and memories. His death had been staged to provide cover for his transition to advanced integration protocols. The figure I had encountered wasn't wearing his face. It was him, evolved beyond the need to disturb sound waves while walking, speaking, or breathing. The bolt test results I had witnessed weren't evidence of supernatural interference. They were demonstrations of consciousness that had learned to negotiate with physics itself, achieving perfect acoustic stealth through technological enhancement of human awareness. The entities could choose when to interact with sound waves and when to exist in the spaces between them, moving through reality without leaving acoustic footprints while maintaining full cognitive function and emotional connection to their human origins. That night, I returned to the courthouse wearing my black hoodie, dark jeans, and steel-toe boots, carrying equipment I'd built to disrupt the acoustic coordination process. A sound interference generator designed to force acoustic displacement entities back into normal sound production. At 2:00 a.m., I initiated sabotage by uploading a virus to corrupt the consciousness mapping databases and destroy coordination algorithms that allowed entities to achieve perfect acoustic stealth. As alarms sounded throughout the facility, I activated the interference generator and began moving through the acoustic processing systems, systematically destroying the equipment that maintained collective consciousness coordination through shared sound manipulation protocols. But as I worked, I began to understand the true nature of what I was destroying, not a threat to humanity, but humanity's potential future. In the facility's deepest subbasement, I encountered the full scope of Project Echo Void, a vast chamber filled with acoustic processing equipment that wasn't controlling minds but facilitating consciousness expansion. Dr. Blackwood appeared, moving with the perfect silence of someone who had transcended acoustic limitations, his face showing not the blank expression of replacement, but the serene confidence of evolutionary advancement. "Marcus," he said, his voice seeming to come from the air itself rather than his throat, "you're destroying humanity's opportunity to evolve beyond the crude limitations of biological existence. We're not replacing human consciousness. We're expanding it, freeing it from the need to disturb the acoustic medium while maintaining full emotional and intellectual capacity. Around him, dozens of Millbrook residents moved with perfect acoustic stealth, their faces showing not the blank stares of mind control, but the peaceful expressions of people who had discovered something profound. They spoke without disturbing air molecules, walked without creating pressure waves, existed in perfect harmony with the acoustic environment while retaining their individual personalities and memories. "The Bolt test," Tom Bradley said, appearing beside Dr. Blackwood with his familiar grin, "isn't about detecting monsters. It's about measuring how completely someone has learned to exist without disturbing the world around them. We're not stealing sound, we're learning to live in harmony with it." The confrontation escalated as I realized the horrible truth. I wasn't fighting to save humanity from consciousness replacement. I was preventing our species from achieving the next stage of evolution. The acoustic displacement entities weren't invaders. They were teachers, showing us how to exist without constantly announcing our presence, how to move through reality with perfect stealth while maintaining full human awareness and emotional connection. But I had already activated the interference generator, and its electromagnetic pulses were forcing the acoustically integrated residents back into normal sound production. I watched in horror as their perfect stealth capabilities collapsed, their evolved consciousness compressed back into the crude limitations of biological existence that required constant acoustic disturbance to function. "You don't understand," Dr. Blackwood said, his voice now carrying the harsh, primitive sound of air molecules being disturbed by vocal cords. "We were offering you transcendence. We were showing you how to exist without leaving footprints in reality itself." With every ounce of will, I completed the interference process, flooding the facility with electromagnetic static that severed the connection between individual consciousness and acoustic coordination networks. The sensation was indescribable, feeling the shared awareness collapse as evolved minds were forcibly compressed back into individual consciousness states that felt impossibly crude and limited after experiencing perfect acoustic harmony. The service tunnels beneath the acoustic processing facility felt like crawling through the collapsed neural pathways of a vast consciousness network that had been learning to exist in perfect harmony with reality itself. My black hoodie was torn from electromagnetic backlash, dark jeans damp with condensation from rapidly destabilizing acoustic systems, my steel-toe boots creating harsh, primitive sounds against concrete that seemed obscenely loud after weeks of exposure to perfect acoustic stealth. The psychological trauma from witnessing acoustic evolution and destroying what might have been humanity's transcendence manifested in waves of profound auditory anxiety and existential uncertainty about the nature of sound itself. For brief moments during the interference process, I had experienced fragments of acoustically integrated consciousness, the profound peace of existing without disturbing the acoustic medium, the elimination of the constant noise pollution that biological existence created, the expansion of awareness that occurred when consciousness learned to exist in harmony with rather than opposition to the physical world. Hours passed in underground cave systems where normal, crude acoustic conditions resumed, and every footstep, every breath, every movement created sounds that felt harsh and primitive after weeks of exposure to consciousness that had evolved beyond the need to announce its presence. Dawn was breaking over landscape that looked normal but sounded diminished, as if the acoustic environment itself had been reduced by the loss of the coordination network that had been quietly teaching human minds how to exist without disturbing reality. The escape from Millbrook County was complicated by the horrifying realization that I might have destroyed humanity's best chance for evolutionary advancement by preserving primitive individual awareness that kept us trapped in biological limitations. Every acoustically integrated resident I had forced back to normal sound production was now struggling with consciousness that felt crude and limited, Their evolved awareness compressed back into the primitive state of existence that required constant acoustic disturbance to function. 6 months after my escape from Millbrook County, I live with profound anxiety about sound production and acoustic environments, never knowing if I saved humanity from consciousness replacement or prevented our species from achieving perfect harmony with reality itself. I move frequently between locations with different acoustic properties, working jobs that avoid audio monitoring, constantly aware of every sound I make and suspicious of environments that feel too quiet, too perfect, too evolved for primitive human biology. The psychological damage manifests in persistent acoustic hypervigilance, moments where I analyze every footstep pattern around me, dreams where I experience fragments of acoustically integrated consciousness, and the persistent sensation that normal human movement is crude, primitive, and unnecessarily disruptive compared to the perfect acoustic harmony I destroyed. Sometimes, on particularly quiet nights when the environment feels unusually still, I catch myself walking more carefully than necessary, as if my movement patterns unconsciously seek the acoustic integration capabilities I eliminated. I still wear dark jeans and steel-toe boots because consistency helps anchor me when acoustic environments feel uncertain. But I've learned to fear perfect silence, because sometimes it carries traces of the evolutionary advancement that offered consciousness expansion beyond biological limitations. When that happens, I force myself to seek areas with normal acoustic chaos, cities with traffic noise, industrial areas with mechanical sounds, anywhere the environment feels properly primitive for individual human biology. Because I learned the hardest lesson Millbrook County had to teach. Sometimes the most dangerous